Hello everyone, and welcome to another Rain City Pattern Company sewing tutorial. I'm going to be sewing up today. It has a cute little side split that you could tie or leave untied, and it also has fun little stripes that you can add to the sleeve. So right now what I'm doing is I'm preparing my projector so that I can cut the fabric out. So I just turned the projector on and I got my MacBook talking to it. I'm using a Vivi image and a MacBook Pro, and I have the pattern open in Adobe Reader. And so you probably can't see this, but my 1-inch grid is very small and it's right here. So that tells me that I need to zoom in. So I'm gonna go into Adobe Reader and I'm gonna zoom in. And I already know what my settings need to be. So I'm just going to zoom into 35%. And when you set your projector up, you'll figure out what your settings need to be. Okay, so my grid is much larger, as you can see. And so I'm just gonna move my cutting mat around to see if my calibration is correct, because how I cast the file affects my grid. I don't know if other people have this problem, but if I don't choose mirror built-in retina display, my calibration grid doesn't actually match up with my mat. And if it doesn't match up with the mat, that means the pattern is also going to be off. So it's real important when I do this that I make sure all those settings are right. And if I only used a 1-inch square, there's no way I'd be able to know that I wasn't on that other setting. So I use my computer to help my kids with their school, so I switch in between these two displays. So let me just check it out. All right, so that's looking pretty good. I checked my setting. I am doing mirror built-in retina display, and I'm at my zoom, which is 35%. My grid's looking good. I'm gonna turn my grid layer off. I'm gonna turn my size that I'm sewing on and my keep selected layer on. That's gonna have all my good information on it. Okay, so now it's just a matter of laying out my pattern pieces and cutting them out. So let's just do that really quick. Okay, so all the pieces are cut out, and I apologize that I can't fit this all on the screen, but I'm actually making a real size. Usually I shrink it down so it all fits, but I plan to wear this. So I got my 2 sleeves, and they're not reverse. The pieces are mirrored, so if I put them right sides together, both of the back markings are on the same side. I transferred my back marking to my sleeve, but I forgot to do it before I turned my projector off, so I'm going to wing that. But you at home can use your pattern piece if it's printed out, or turn your projector back on. So here is my neckband. Very hard to see, right there. And that was cut on the fold. And then I have my sleeve stripe. Here's one of them. And there's the other one. I'm only going to do one sleeve with the stripe because I'm inherently lazy. And I've already put an applique on the front of the shirt, and I'm sweaty and I'm tired. Okay, so moving on. Over here we have the back of the shirt. It doesn't have an applique on it. I did draw a red X on the wrong side, so you'd be able to tell because I am using solid black. And then the front is underneath the back, and it has the applique on it. Okay, so this is the wrong side of my stripe. Can't really tell because there's no print, but you'll just have to believe me. And what we're going to do is we're going to press each end into the middle like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to try to do the best you can do for this. Now we're going to position the stripes on the sleeve. So it'll go folded side down. Remember, these stripes for the long sleeve are much lower on the sleeve. I'm gonna pin it in place. Seems even. We can fold it in half when we're done getting it pinned. Both of them pinned, and then check it. Because when you fold it in half and you line up the side seams, each side of the stripe should also match up. Then we'll take it over to the sewing machine and zigzag down all 4 edges, all 4 long edges. Okay. So then I'm going to fold it in half just to see how my eyeballing did. And that's pretty close. What adjustments are needed, I can deal with later if I want to deal with them at all. So now we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to zigzag this on this edge, and then this edge. Make sure that fold is tucked in, and then this one and that one. Okay, so for this we want a zigzag stitch. So I have my zigzag selected, and I've already got my settings changed. I want it 4 wide, and then 3 long. Although I do like 3.5, 3.5. As long as you don't make it like, excuse me, super duper long. When it gets long like that, it kind of turns into a straight stitch and it loses its stretchy ability. So whatever you like that still has high peaks and low peaks, you know, use that. Okay, so to the needle. It's not really necessary to back stitch this because the seam is going to get caught when we sew the sleeve in half, but you know, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so that's done. If you're doing stripes on both sleeves, go ahead and do your other sleeve, and I'll meet you back at the table and we'll start assembling our shirt. Okay, we're gonna work on our shoulder seams next. So this is the front of my shirt. It has the applique on it. It's right side up. I'm going to take the back of the shirt. I'm gonna lay it right sides together so that red X I was talking about, you're going to be able to see that. And I'm gonna line up the shoulder seams, and then I'm gonna take it over to my sewing machine, my serger, but you can use your sewing machine, and I'm only gonna sew the shoulder seams, okay? Okay, now I'm gonna take it over to the serger, and I'm gonna sew those shoulder seams that I have clipped. Okay, shoulder seams, I'm doing this on my serger. You can do it on your sewing machine. You can use a straight stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch. It does not matter. Just maintain that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, next we're gonna open up our shirt and we're going to lay it right side up so you can see my applique and you can't see my red X because the red X means the wrong side. Now we're only going to sew one sleeve on. And the sleeve we're going to sew on is the sleeve that goes to the short side seam of the shirt, right? That longer side seam, we're not going to sew the sleeve onto it in the traditional sense that we usually do here at Rain City. So now you have to figure out which sleeve, right? So I've marked the back of the sleeve with a pin, and the way you're gonna know if it's the right sleeve is if when you flip it so that it's right sides together with the shirt, that back mark is at the back of the shirt. So let's try this sleeve I have set out. So this is not the right sleeve. This is the sleeve for the long side of the shirt, and we know because my sleeve is right sides together and the back of my sleeve is at the front of my shirt. So here's that pin. And that's not right. So I know it's the other sleeve. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm going to line up that armpit area. I'm going to find the middle of my sleeve cap, and that I'm going to line up with that seam, that shoulder seam. Make sure that shoulder seam is folded to the back of your shirt. Now I can take it over to my serger. You can use your sewing machine, and we're going to sew this sleeve on. So I'm going to draw up the corners of the sleeve to the armpit of the shirt, and we'll start sewing, gently stretching as needed to the clip. We're going to pull that clip out. We're going to make sure that that shoulder seam is facing the correct direction, which is to the back, and then we're going to keep sewing down to the other armpit. So let me just show you what that kind of is going to look like without it being on the machine. Well, that looked like shit, but you get the point. So let's head over to the serger and I'll show you how to really do it. Okay, here's the sleeve. Here's that corner. Here's that other corner. This is the bottom of your armpit. There's my notch. So I'm at the back of my shirt. I'm just gonna line these up. I'm just going to get a few stitches in, and I'm going to screw with it some more. Okay, so the sleeve is on. It's flipped down right now. I'm going to flip it over so you guys see what the after look looks like. Okay, and not to forget the other sleeve, we're going to fold that in half. So we're actually going to fold the shirt in half, and we're going to sew the short side seam and that sleeve we just sewed on. And we're also going to fold the sleeve in half and sew it, but we're not sewing it to the shirt just yet. Okay, so it is lined up. We're just doing this one side. Okay, so we're gonna sew from the bottom of the armpit to, the bottom of the sleeve to the armpit, and then down to the bottom again. Now, if you don't have a serger, my serger is gonna cut that extra hangover of the strip off. If you don't have a serger, cut it off. If you don't think your serger can handle it, because some of them can't, cut it off now. Why even deal with it, right? Okay, so we're gonna do that, and we're also gonna do that other sleeve. Okay, so with this sleeve, we're gonna sew from the bottom of the armpit area all the way down to the hem, and then we're going to work on our hems. Okay, so here's that sleeve. Just going to give it a quick sew. I don't need that on there anymore. Okay, so here's one of my sleeves. I'm going to fold it up 1 inch. I'm eyeballing it because that's what I do, but you know, you should measure it. Be the better sewist. All right, let's go sew these hems. I'm going to use a zigzag because I'm lazy and I don't want to change the orange thread out of my cover stitch because I don't think orange would look very good with this. But you can use a cover stitch, you can use a zigzag, you can use a twin needle, whatever's going to give you a stretch. Okay, so we're going to do our sleeves. I've already got one sleeve finished and the hem. Okay, so our hem has been sewn for our sleeves and the bottom of our shirt. Now we're gonna fold our shirt right sides together again at that shoulder seam like we did when we sewed the side seam for the sleeve side, this side over here. We are going to sew the side seam of the long end now. We're not gonna sew the whole thing down. We're just going to sew to where the mark is, right there. And if you want to find out where your mark is, check out your pattern piece. There should be a side split hem mark, something, it's called something. So something also a little bit unique about this side is we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we're going to sew from there to there with a straight stitch. I like to use a straight stitch for this part. I think the seam looks nicer. If you feel like you have an issue with seams popping, your side seams popping, use a stretch stitch. It's really not that big of a deal. So we're gonna go over to the sewing machine and I'm gonna sew from the bottom of the armpit all the way down to right there. Okay. Okay, we're sewing that side seam. We're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so we're taking a little bit bigger of a chunk. If you have a serger and you like that serge look, go ahead and serge down these sides and then fold them together. All right, let's go over to the iron and iron this seam open. Okay, we're looking at the inside of the shirt at that seam we were just working on. We're just gonna press it open. So a 1/2 inch to either side. Okay, I got this little tail here. I'm just going to fold it inside. Take it up and out of the way. Okay, got that corner. Just gonna tuck it in and pull it back over. Okay, now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and using a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, we're going to sew this seam allowance open. So I'm only going to sew a little bit above my split, maybe an inch or so. I'll stop around, let's see, where's the split? So I'll stop right here. Sew down, sew, starting here, or maybe the other side up, around pivot and come back down. If you have sensitivity issues, you're more than welcome to actually press this entire seam open and sew all the way up to the armpit and then all the way back down to the bottom. And that's gonna keep that seam nice and flat for you. Okay, got my straight stitch set. I got a little bit of a tail here. I'm just gonna tuck it in. I can cut it off. I'm just gonna tuck it in. There we go. Holding my tails. Back stitch. Make sure your needle's down when you pivot. Okay, so trim your threads and we're gonna insert that sleeve and get that sleeve sewn on. Okay, so our next step is to insert that sleeve and sew it on. And then after that, all we have left is the neckband and we'll be done. So my shirt is inside out right now. You can tell because my sleeve that's sewn on is over here is all white. That means this sleeve needs to be right side out because I'm going to insert it inside of the shirt, and then that's the right side and it needs to be right sides together. So unfold this. Okay, I'm going to fold this at that seam and I'm going to find the center of my sleeve cap. There it is right there. I'm going to insert this sleeve into that shirt. And I'm going to line up this point right here with that shoulder seam. And I'm also going to make sure that that seam is towards the back of my shirt. This seam will go right there. And I'll stagger them. So one's going to go one way and one's going to go the other way. And I don't have a personal preference on that. So it'll just be however they want to fold. Now I'm going to take it over to my serger and I'm gonna sew it on like I would sew a band on. Super easy. I'm gonna start at this bottom armpit area, just like I would if I wasn't sewing it in the already finished arm side. And I'll gently stretch as needed to that shoulder seam. And then I'll remove that clip and continue sewing all the way back down to the bottom. Okay, final sleeve, starting at the armpit. My seam is open, though it's hard to tell because the lighting in here sucks. Oh my God, these sleeves. Here we go. So I'm sewing in the round. My foot's going to be in this roundness, this round area. Just getting a few stitches in before I start screwing around with my fabric. Okay, we're at the final stages. We need to sew the neckband into a circle. So you're gonna fold it right sides together. I'm using rib knit. I recommend you use rib knit. Is there a right side? Is there a wrong side? Not on the stuff I'm using. It's gray on both sides. Sometimes some have prints. And in which case you would fold it print side together, right side together. So I'm gonna fold this right side together and then we're gonna sew only that short seam. I'm gonna use a straight stitch and you can use one too. So now we're gonna go over to the sewing machine. We're gonna sew this little bit from here all the way to there. Neckband, neckband, neckband. Sometimes I forget it's already in reverse. I'm gonna go take this to my iron and I'm going to press this seam open. You will not be joining me because I'm getting tired tired. So I'm gonna press it open like this, and I'm going to fold it in half like this and press it again. Okay, neckband. It's been folded, it's been pressed. I folded it in half. I marked the center front of the neckband, whoop, which is gonna be right here. It's the side opposite of the seam. Seam, center front, seam, center back. Fold your shirt in half at the shoulder seams right here. And you'll mark center front and center back also. I like to use a pin because it's super precise. So here's center front and here's center back. Now I'm gonna open up this shirt and it's right side out, as you can see David right here. And then I'm going to pin the, well actually I'll clip the neckband to the right side of the shirt. Now I'm gonna take this masterpiece over to my serger and I'm going to sew it on. I'm gonna start at center back and I'm gonna gently stretch the neckband as needed as I sew to the shoulder seam. I'm gonna make sure my shoulder seams, I'm gonna make sure the shoulder seam is folded to the back. Then I'm gonna continue sewing to center front, remove the pin or clip, continue gently stretching my neckband as needed to the other shoulder seam where I'll make sure that it's also towards the back, and then I'll end at center back, overlapping by, I don't know, at least 3/8 of an inch. Okay, final step, neckband. This is center back. You can tell by my seam. I'll make sure that's not down like that. Okay, just gonna slide it under. Okay, pull this back. Get a few stitches in. I'm going to stretch my band and line up all these raw edges to the Well, that turned out much cooler than I anticipated. Wonderful. I love it. I love it. It's perfect. Okay, I hope your shirt turns out super great too, and I will sew with you next time. Bye.